Imagine a world in which facial recognition software performed 34% better on lighter-skinned faces than darker-skinned ones. Imagine the man of colour face down on his driveway being wrongly arrested in front of his wife and children. Imagine the woman who has her personal therapy notes used against her in an employment tribunal claim because they've been uploaded to AI. Imagine a woman assessed by AI more poorly compared to a male counterpart with exactly the same CV. Now imagine the loss of self-esteem and the trauma that could follow those events. These are not made-up examples. They are real-world stories or sandboxed experiments which show the harms that can be caused from the outputs of AI. My name is Louise Humpington. I'm a former lawyer, an executive coach, and a specialist in the ethics and governance of AI. Some years ago, I was working in Papua New Guinea as the country director for Oxfam. Now, PNG is one of the most extraordinary places on earth. It has over 800 distinct languages. It has ecosystems that exist absolutely nowhere else. It has communities that have sustained themselves for tens of thousands of years on knowledge that's never been written down, but lived in people. It also has, in some parts, levels of violence that are genuinely difficult to comprehend from the outside. Sorcery-related killings and gender-based violence on a scale which is endemic. Community conflict and intertribal violence has become normalised, and woven through all of that is trauma. Not just individual trauma, of course that was everywhere. Intergenerational trauma, collective trauma, trauma that had been handed down through families and through communities. I sat with people, women mostly, but not exclusively so, who had experienced horrendous things that I don't have the right to describe in detail here because they're not my stories to tell. What I can tell you is that those conversations changed the way I understand human beings. They changed the way I understand what it means to be present when someone is in distress. They are, without exaggeration, a part of why I'm sitting here talking to you today about artificial intelligence. Because what I saw in PNG and what I've seen in every high-stakes environment I've ever worked in since is the same pattern. Systems built without the people they affect. Decisions made without the voices of those who will bear the consequences. And harms, entirely predictable harms, flowing from that absence. AI isn't any different, it's just faster. And the stakes for your clients are already real. Before we talk about what AI means for your practice, I want to spend a few minutes on something that gets often skipped in these conversations. What AI actually is in the lives of the people sitting across from you. AI isn't just a chatbot your client might use to help draft an email. It's the algorithm that scored their mortgage application and declined it. It's the automated screening tool that filtered their CV before a human even read it. It is the risk assessment system used by their child's school. It's the content recommendation engine that has for the last 3 years been showing them a particular version of the world that confirms and amplifies whatever they already believe, or that leads them into a toxic filter bubble. It's the mental health app that they downloaded at 2 o'clock in the morning because they didn't know where else to turn. For clients who are already navigating systems from a position of disadvantage, clients who carry trauma, clients from marginalised communities, clients with protected characteristics, these systems are not neutral. They were not built with those clients in mind, and when they fail, and they do, they fail on those clients the hardest. The reason that happens is devastatingly simple. The people building the systems and the people who were used to train and evaluate them were not representative of everyone who would use them. The accuracy problem and the equity problem are the same problem. They live in the same place. Now you might be thinking, well, that's a technology story, not a coaching story. But I want to gently push back on that because your clients are living inside these systems every day. And the way that those systems have treated them, the ways that those systems have made them feel unseen, misclassified, excluded, or simply just not catered for, is showing up in your sessions. You just might not have a name for it. So here's a question I'd like you to reflect on after this session. Think about a client you're currently working with who is dealing with a sense of powerlessness, or who describes feeling like systems are working against them rather than for them. How much of that experience might be rooted not in their psychology, but in their actual documented experience of algorithmic systems that were not built for them? And how does your coaching response change if the answer to that question is quite a lot? One of the most important things I've learned in my career is that trauma isn't just what happens to individuals. It's what happens to families and to communities, to cultures, and to the relationship between people and the systems that are supposed to serve them. When a community has been subjected to sustained violence, when its members have repeatedly experienced harm at the hands of authority, when its knowledge and its ways of understanding the world have been treated as irrelevant or inferior, that experience becomes embedded. It changes not just how people relate to institutions, it changes what they expect from systems. It changes the body's response to stress, and it passes down generationally. I worked with people and communities all over the world who have for generations experienced the imposition of external structures that consistently failed to ask what they needed and consistently assumed that the person from the outside knew best. The communities most likely to experience harm from poorly governed AI systems are almost without exception the same communities that have the longest history of being harmed by poorly governed systems of other kinds. The same groups who were excluded from the data, the same groups whose voices were not in the room when the test cases were written, the same groups for whom standard was never actually standard. When an AI system makes a wrongful decision about someone's welfare claim, or misidentifies someone in a security context, or delivers a mental health resource that was never designed for someone with their cultural background or communication style, it doesn't just cause practical harm in that moment. For someone who already carries a history of being failed by systems, it confirms something they already knew and feared, and it adds another layer. It can, in clinical terms, be re-traumatizing. As coaches, we're trained to understand the nervous system's response to threat. We know about hypervigilance. We know about the way that past experiences shape present perceptions. What we're less trained to do is look upstream and ask, what are the systems my client's navigating now that might be actively contributing to the state that they're presenting in? And what are my responsibilities when I start to understand the answer to that question? A few years ago, I had a client, we'll call her Maya. She came to me in a state of profound distress following a period of repeated unsuccessful attempts to access mental health support through the NHS systems. Every time she was assessed, scored, triaged. Every time the system had found her not quite unwell enough to qualify for the support that she needed. She wasn't in crisis, she was in the gap. But what emerged over time was that the assessment tools being used had been designed primarily around presentations common in white, Western, neurotypical populations. Maya's cultural background meant that she expressed distress differently. Her stoicism, which was not an absence of suffering, but a deeply cultural response to it, was being read by the system as resilience. She was being marked down for her coping mechanisms. The very strategies she'd developed to survive were now being used against her. Now, I'm not telling you this story to make you angry, although anger might be a reasonable response. I'm telling you because it's the kind of story that's happening right now in AI-mediated systems at scale. The assessment tools becoming algorithmic, the triage is being automated, and the cultural competency problem, the representation problem, the who designed this system and for whom problem is being baked into code and deployed at a speed which makes it really hard to catch. I want to shift now onto something more immediately practical, because I know that many of you are already using or considering using AI tools in your coaching practice. And I want to talk frankly about what that means, because the conversation in coaching circles tends to be either enthusiastically promotional or vaguely anxious, and neither is entirely adequate. Your duty of care to your clients doesn't stop at the edge of your relationship with them. It extends to the systems that you invite into that relationship. When a client shares something with you in a coaching session, they are sharing it with you. They are trusting your discretion, your professional framework, your ethics code. If you are using an AI tool to transcribe, to summarize, to analyze, or to process that conversation in any way, you're sharing it with a third party. And depending on the tool, on its terms of service, on where its servers are located, on how its data is handled, that information might be used in ways that neither you nor your client ever consented to. The EU's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, and the UK's equivalent give clients rights over their personal data. The EU AI Act, which is now in force, creates new obligations. Mental health wellbeing support is on the list. You don't need to be a lawyer to navigate this, but you do need to ask better questions of the tools that you're using. Now, let's think that through in a practical context. Take the AI tool you use most frequently in your practice, or the one you're seriously considering using. Read its privacy policy. If you're finding it difficult to understand, use an AI tool to translate it into plain language and specifically look for 3 things. 1, where is the data stored and processed? 2, is your client data used to train the model? And 3, what are your rights to have the data deleted? If you can't find clear answers to those 3 questions, that is in itself an answer. And it is information your clients deserve to have before they step into a space where the tool is present. Now, I'm not being anti-technology. I use AI and I find some of it genuinely useful, but usefulness and safety are not the same thing in a therapeutic or a coaching context. And the bar for informed consent is rightly higher than in most other settings. We're now going to spend a few minutes looking at something I suspect most coaches have not fully absorbed yet, but it is already law and the compliance clock is already running. The EU AI Act came into force in August 2024. It's the world's first comprehensive legislation on artificial intelligence, and it operates extraterritorially. So whether you're based in the UK, in the US, Japan, Ethiopia, Kiribati, or New Zealand, if you're using AI and you're working with clients who are in Europe, or the output of the AI reaches a European resident, even if they're not situated in Europe, the legislation applies to you. Now, the geography of your server is not the relevant question. The geography of the person impacted by the AI system is. The Act works on a tiered risk model. At the top, there are certain AI practices which are outright prohibited. So that's things like systems which use subliminal manipulation that exploit vulnerable people or that deploy social scoring. Below that sits the high-risk tier, where the most significant compliance obligations live. Below that, limited risk, where basic transparency requirements apply. And at the bottom, minimal risk, which is largely unregulated. Now, where does coaching sit? Well, the honest answer is it entirely depends on what you're doing and with what tools. The Act does not name coaching as a specific category, but its Annex 3, which lists high-risk use cases, includes AI systems used in healthcare, education, and employment contexts that can significantly affect people's health, safety, or fundamental rights. It also explicitly captures AI systems that profile individuals by processing personal data to assess aspects of a person's life, including their health, emotional state, preferences, and behaviour. So if you're using an AI tool that analyses your client's responses, tracks patterns, makes inferences about their psychological state, or informs decisions about how you support them, you might well be operating in a high-risk territory, or at the very minimum, you need to be careful about where you sit on the spectrum. What's already in force and what already applies is Article 4. That's been active since 2025, and it requires providers and deployers of AI systems to take measures to ensure a sufficient level of AI literacy amongst their staff and anyone else operating AI systems on their behalf. The Act defines AI literacy as the skills, knowledge, and understanding that allow people to make informed decisions about the deployment and use of AI systems. So that includes awareness of the opportunities, the risks, and the potential harms that could be caused. That definition, if you read it carefully, is a fairly precise description of what this session's for. There's no direct fine for violating the Article 4 literacy requirement itself, but providers and deployers can face civil liability if harm is caused by the use of AI systems by staff who have not been adequately trained. So if you're using AI transcription or analysis tools with a vulnerable client and that client experiences harm as a result, the absence of a documented literacy program makes any defense significantly harder. The GDPR layer then sits underneath all of that. Health data, mental health data, and data revealing emotional or psychological states are specific categories under GDPR Article 9. Processing that data requires explicit consent. When an AI tool processes a session transcript that contains disclosures about a client's mental health, their trauma history, or their emotional state, that is a special category of data processing. The practical implication is straightforward. Before you deploy an AI tool in a coaching or therapeutic context, ask 3 questions. 1. Does this tool process any personal data about my clients in a way that they have explicitly consented to? 2. Does the tool's data governance meet the standards required for the special category of health data? And 3, do I have or can I document a sufficient level of AI literacy to understand what I'm using and what it does? If the answer of any of those 3 questions is uncertain, that uncertainty is itself a compliance signal. I'm not saying this to frighten you. I am saying it because informed consent in coaching, as in law, depends on actual information. And right now, most practitioners using AI tools in their practice do not have adequate information about what those tools are doing with their clients' data. I've been working at the intersections of law, diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging for most of my career. Since pivoting into the ethics and governance of AI, one of my arguments has been that DEIB is not a values exercise, it's a quality control mechanism. Amy Edmondson's research at Harvard Business School on psychological safety, which spans multiple studies from 1999 onwards, establishes something really important here. Teams with higher psychological safety catch more errors, not because they make fewer mistakes, but because the environment makes it possible to name them. In AI development, where a failure mode can be invisible until it affects a group of users who are not represented in the test set, the ability to say, this system will not work for people like me, is not a cultural nicety. It is an organizational and structural control. The coaching profession is already ahead on this. The work that's been done in coaching around cultural humility, intersectionality, and trauma-informed practice gives our community a set of analytical tools that most AI governance conversations completely lack. And I think it creates a responsibility too, not just to use AI carefully in your own practice, but also to bring your professional knowledge into the wider conversation about how these systems are governed. To respond to consultations, to ask hard questions of the companies pitching you their products and those you might be providing services to say from a position of professional authority, this matters and here's why. But there's a second question to take away here too. Think about the communities you work with most frequently, the clients who are most present in your practice. If you were to sit on an advisory panel for an AI tool that was going to be used with one of those clients, what would you need to know before you endorsed it? Write that list, and it will tell you more about the governance questions worth asking than any compliance checklist. The skills that coaches and therapists bring to their work are the skills that AI governance most urgently needs. The ability to hold complexity without rushing to a resolution, the capacity to sit with ambiguity, the understanding of power dynamics and how they shape communication, the knowledge of what it means to build trust with someone who has reason not to trust systems, and the ability to hear what's not being said. These aren't soft skills, they're sophisticated analytical capabilities that took years to develop. Now, as with most systems that erase or exclude, the people closest to the consequence are almost never the people making the decisions. AI governance has a version of this problem, but at scale. The people building those systems are not, in the main, the people whose lives will be most shaped by them. The people whose professional knowledge most closely mirrors the human consequences of poor AI governance are not, in the main, being invited into those conversations. You are those people. And the question is not whether your voice belongs in this conversation. It does. The question is how you bring it. I started this session with a story from PNG, and I want to close with one too. There's a concept in Tok Pisin, the Creole language of Papua New Guinea, called one tok, and it translates literally as one talk, one language, but it means so much more than that. It means you are my people. Your well-being is my concern, and I won't leave you to navigate the system alone. That is at its core what coaching is all about. And it's also at its core what good AI governance needs to become. Not compliance, not audit, not a checklist completed after the harm's already been caused, but a genuine commitment to the question, who does this system affect, and are those people in the room? You are the practitioners who understand at the deepest level what happens to people when systems fail them. You carry that knowledge every time you sit with a client. The invitation I want to leave you with is this. Don't leave it in the room. Bring it into the wider conversation. The technology is moving so fast. The governance is moving not fast enough. And the gap between them is being filled right now with real people and real lives. You know what that gap costs. It's time the people building these systems understand that too. If anything today has stirred something in you, something personal, please be kind to yourself about that. It's a sign that you're human and that you care. Thank you genuinely for being here, for engaging with material that's not always comfortable, and for bringing the quality of attention you've brought to this conversation. The work you do matters enormously. The fact that you're engaging with these questions about AI, about ethics, about the people most at risk matters enormously. Don't underestimate the value of what this community brings to these conversations. If anything has resonated and you'd like to explore it further, I would love to hear from you. I'm really happy to have a confidential half-hour conversation with anyone who wants to think through what any of this means for their own practice. No agenda, no sales pitch, just a genuine conversation. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can reach out to me directly at louise@kairosynthesis.com or through my website at www.kairosynthesis.com. Both will be on the next screen. Please take care of yourselves, and thank you for listening.